The city was moving, but she had already stopped. Even as traffic rolled on and people brushed past with umbrellas and earbuds, Lena Harper stood at the curb, gripping the handle of a worn suitcase. Her clothes were damp, not from the rain, but from the walk she had taken without thinking, without a plan. She had walked out of Crest Dynamics 30 minutes ago. No speech, no drama. Just silence. 2 years. That's how long she had worked. No, lived, in the orbit of Damien Crest. The man who could shift markets with a sentence, charm investors with a glance, and yet couldn't bring himself to say one simple truth. She mattered. Lena exhaled slowly as the walk signal blinked green. She stepped into the street, suitcase trailing behind, heartbeat finally slowing. It wasn't anger she felt. It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was done. The night before had started like all the others. Late meeting, closed office, the city glowing beyond the glass. He sat on the edge of his desk, sleeves rolled, phone in one hand, scotch in the other. She stood by the window, watching lights flicker across the skyline, and then she asked, quietly, directly, "Do you see a future where you ever acknowledge us?" There was a pause. Not long, just long enough to say everything. He didn't lie, he didn't promise, he didn't answer. She nodded. That was all she needed. This morning she had left it on his desk, her resignation, no explanations. No plea for understanding. Inside the envelope was more than a formality. It was closure. A closing chapter she had delayed too long. She didn't clean out her desk, didn't say goodbye to the team. The assistant who knew every detail of the CEO's life had become a ghost in her own. The receptionist didn't stop her. No one did, which made it easier, which made it hurt more. Damien Crest didn't notice she was gone, not right away. He was in back-to-back meetings. Quarterly numbers, investor decks, a breakfast he didn't touch, a board call he didn't hear half of. Someone mentioned Lena hadn't been in that morning. He nodded, said he'd look into it. But as the hours passed and her absence stretched longer, something shifted. He went to her desk. It was empty. Her chair was turned slightly, as if she had stepped away for a minute, as if she might come back, but she wouldn't. He saw the envelope. He read it twice. He didn't move for a long time after that. That evening, Damien didn't go to his apartment. He stayed in the office, lights off, looking out over the city they used to talk about late into the night. He didn't drink. He didn't speak to anyone. There was no one to explain it to, because he didn't know how to explain it to himself. She had asked for something simple. Respect, clarity, truth. And he hadn't given it. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because giving it would mean admitting something he wasn't ready to face. Now, it was too late. Lena Harper unlocked the door to her new apartment just after sunset. The space was clean, small, and silent. It didn't overlook any skyline. It didn't carry echoes of late-night strategy calls or whispered promises made between floor-to-ceiling glass walls. She dropped her keys into the bowl by the door and set her suitcase down. There wasn't much inside it. Just a few clothes, a tablet, a book she hadn't finished, and a scarf she almost didn't take but did anyway. The one Damien Crest used to borrow without asking when he walked her to her car in the winter, only to return it the next day, folded, but still carrying the scent of his cologne. She tossed it into the closet and closed the door. In this place, he didn't exist. The following week, the rhythm of Crest Dynamics began to break. Nothing dramatic at first, just delays. Gaps in communication, small cracks in the precision Lena Harper used to hold together like invisible thread. Damien Crest sat in a meeting with the acquisitions team, staring at the presentation on the screen. The numbers were fine, the projections were clean, but something was off. He couldn't focus. His questions lacked sharpness. He approved a decision he normally would have challenged. Jameson, his CFO, gave him a look across the table but said nothing. When the meeting ended, Damien went back to his office and sat at his desk. Her chair was gone. He had told facilities to clear it out. He didn't want reminders. But now, the empty space was louder than her presence had ever been. Lena Harper's name hadn't been spoken aloud in the building since her departure, but she was everywhere. Her initials were still on the shared drive folders. Her notes were still in the margins of last quarter's strategic plan. Her systems still ran smoother than any replacement could replicate. Damien Crest reviewed a calendar alert she'd once color-coded based on urgency. Red for board level, blue for press, green for personal. Today's alert was green. It read, Annual Medical Screening, Dr. Wexler, 4 p.m. Lena had said it 6 months ago. He deleted it. And then, a few seconds later, he opened his phone and texted the doctor's office to confirm his appointment. He wasn't sure why. At a small startup in Queens, Lena Harper sat across from a founder who looked no older than 25. He smiled too often and asked the same questions she had answered a dozen times that week. You worked directly under Damien Crest? He asked. That must have been intense. Lena nodded. It was. And you left voluntarily? She smiled politely. I wanted something different, more space, less pressure. Did he ever try anything inappropriate? The question landed like a crack across a glass table. She didn't flinch. No. The interview ended 5 minutes later. She didn't expect a callback. She didn't want one. Damien Crest's birthday came and went without notice. No party. No headlines. Just a quiet dinner with board members he barely spoke to. The seat beside him at the restaurant remained empty. Halfway through the meal, he glanced at his phone. No message from Lena Harper. Not even a missed call. A year ago, she had left a single handwritten note on his desk that read, Happy birthday. You still don't know how to take a day off. I'm bringing you cake whether you like it or not. That night, she had shown up with lemon cake and a second fork. They ate in silence. She never sang. He had never cared for the song. He remembered every bite. This year, there was no cake. Only silence. And it tasted like regret. It wasn't until a scheduled negotiation with Japanese investors that the impact became undeniable. Damien Crest arrived 5 minutes late. He didn't apologize. He sat down, glanced at the documents, and didn't open his mouth for the first 20 minutes. One of the investors, confused, turned to Jameson, who began to explain the terms. Halfway through the presentation, Damien stood up. Pause this, he said. The room went silent. I need a minute. He walked out. Jameson followed him down the hallway. What's going on? Damien didn't answer. He reached his office, closed the door, and sat down. He wasn't sure how to explain the weight in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was stress, guilt, or something physical. All he knew was that he couldn't breathe the way he used to. Not without her. That evening, he picked up his phone and dialed her number. It rang once, twice, no answer. He hung up before the voicemail. An hour later, he tried again. Still nothing. He typed out a message, I need to talk to you. He deleted it. He wasn't sure what he would say if she did respond. It had been weeks. She owed him nothing. But part of him still believed that if he could just hear her voice, something inside him might stop unraveling. Lena Harper had taken a different route home that day. She stopped by a bookstore she used to visit before everything in her life became measured in deadlines and silence. She bought a journal. No lock, no password, just pages. That night, she wrote about the last 2 years. Not about the secrets or the meetings or the nights she spent in penthouses pretending she didn't want more. She wrote about the version of herself she had left behind. The one who stayed late because he asked. The one who waited for weekends that never came. And as she wrote, she didn't cry. She didn't need to. Letting it go was its own kind of grief. At Crest Dynamics, things were falling out of rhythm. Damien Crest missed a quarterly metrics review. The team rescheduled, assuming it was a conflict. The next day, he canceled again. A pattern began. Missed meetings, last-minute changes, increased friction with the board. Jameson brought it up once, carefully. You don't seem like yourself. Damien dismissed it. I'm fine. But behind closed doors, the signs were harder to ignore. His sleep was broken, his focus fractured. He began skipping meals. He'd stare at reports without seeing them. And every night, without fail, he'd scroll through his call history and stop at her name. Damien Crest didn't believe in annual checkups. Lena Harper had scheduled them for him like clockwork. Now, months overdue, he finally walked into the clinic alone. Dr. Hayes reviewed his blood work with a frown. There's something we need to talk about. Damien nodded once, trying not to react. The word autoimmune was the first one he remembered. Then vascular, then rare. He tuned in again when the doctor said, We'll need to monitor this closely. If it progresses, we may need to discuss transfusions or targeted therapies. Damien asked how urgent it was. The doctor's silence gave him the answer. You'll need someone close, the doctor finally said, in case donor matching becomes necessary. Damien didn't reply, because the only person who might have been that close had already walked away. Lena Harper was halfway through a job application when her phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped her cold. Mia, her former coworker at Crest Dynamics. They hadn't spoken since the day Lena walked away. She hesitated, then picked up. "Hey," Mia said softly, almost unsure. "I wasn't sure if I should call." Lena kept her voice steady. "What's going on? I thought you should know. Something's wrong with Damien." There was a pause. "He collapsed in the office yesterday?" "They took him to the hospital. Jameson's keeping it quiet, but everyone's talking." Lena didn't answer. Her chest tightened, but she forced her tone to stay neutral. "He has a team. He'll be fine." Maybe, but it didn't look like just stress. It looked serious. After the call ended, Lena sat motionless for several minutes. Her hands didn't shake, but her mind raced. She wanted to pretend it didn't affect her. She wanted to stay out of it. She couldn't. Mercy Hospital looked like every other hospital. White walls, polished floors, and fluorescent lighting that made even the healthy seem pale. Lena Harper stood at the information desk, unsure of what she was doing. She had no right to be there. She wasn't family. She wasn't even officially a friend. But she spoke with calm conviction. "I'm his emergency contact," she said, hoping no one had updated the records. The volunteer tapped on her keyboard, checked a screen, then nodded. "Room 904. Take the elevator to the north wing." Lena thanked her and walked away before she lost her nerve. Damien Crest had been drifting in and out for hours. The pain was manageable, the stillness less so. When he opened his eyes and saw Lena Harper standing in the doorway, he thought he was dreaming. She looked the same, but her expression was unreadable. Calm, controlled, distant. "Mia told me what happened," she said simply. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." "Define okay," Damien murmured. His voice was rough, not weak but quieter than usual. She stayed by the door, not stepping closer. "I won't stay long. Don't go yet." The words escaped before he could stop them. She hesitated, then stayed. The doctor arrived shortly after. He glanced at Lena, then at Damien. "Do you want her to stay?" Damien didn't look at her. "She can hear anything you have to say." The doctor nodded. "Your condition is rare. We've seen progression in your vascular system that concerns us. The autoimmune markers are aggressive. We're starting medication, but we'll also need to look at potential donors in case a transfusion or plasma therapy becomes necessary." The word donor echoed in the air like a bell. Lena didn't speak. Damien didn't flinch, but the silence between them shifted. Something unspoken passed through it. Lena Harper didn't go back to his room that night. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't cry. Instead, she walked down 2 floors to the lab, filled out a form, and asked to be tested as a potential donor. "There's only a small chance you'd be a match," the nurse said. "I know," Lena replied. "I still want to try." 3 tubes of blood later, she sat in the waiting area, her hands steady, her heart not. She hadn't come back to fix anything. She wasn't here to relive the past. But if there was any part of her that could help him now, she wasn't going to walk away from that. 2 days later, Lena Harper received a call from the hospital. The voice on the line was calm, professional, but firm. "Miss Harper, your blood type and antibody profile are a rare match with Mr. Crest's. The doctors would like to run further compatibility tests. Are you available to come in this afternoon?" Lena said yes without hesitation. She didn't ask what it meant. She already knew. She arrived at the hospital an hour later, signed a new set of forms, and sat through another round of blood work. This time, her heart wasn't steady. It was pounding. Not out of fear, but because deep down, she already understood what the results would show. While Lena Harper waited for test results, something else was unfolding behind closed doors. At Crest Dynamics, Jameson met privately with 2 members of the board. "He's not well," Jameson said. "His judgment is compromised. His personal life is interfering with his leadership. There's a risk here we need to take seriously." One of the board members leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we prepare for a transition?" Jameson didn't answer directly. "I'm suggesting we consider what happens if this company becomes dependent on a woman who already walked away once." The board exchanged looks. No decisions were made, but the first cracks were opening. Lena Harper's phone rang again the next morning, but this time it wasn't the hospital. It was the HR director of a marketing firm where she'd recently completed a second-round interview. "Miss Harper, the voice said cautiously. "We regret to inform you that we're unable to move forward with your application." Lena frowned. "Why?" "We've received concerns about a past professional conflict. Something regarding your relationship with Damien Crest. It appears there may be ethical implications." Lena's stomach dropped. She hadn't listed Crest Dynamics as a reference, but someone had still reached out. "Who contacted you?" "I'm not at liberty to say." The call ended. The line went dead, and Lena finally understood. This wasn't coincidence. Someone was trying to make sure she didn't get back up. That afternoon, the doctor called Lena back in. He didn't smile, but there was a shift in his voice. "You're a match," he said. "A rare one. Statistically very unlikely, but your blood could help slow the progression significantly. Maybe more." Lena nodded slowly. She didn't ask for more time. She didn't ask about side effects. "When do you need me?" The doctor paused. "We can schedule the first plasma separation next week." Lena stood, thanked him, and left the office. Her phone buzzed as she walked out. Another call from Damien Crest. She didn't answer. Not yet. Damien Crest hadn't left the hospital. Not because he couldn't, but because every time he stood, he felt like the world tilted sideways. His phone sat on the table beside the bed. Lena's name was still at the top of his call log. He hadn't spoken to her since the night she showed up. He didn't know she was the one keeping him alive. But he felt it, somehow. The silence wasn't just absence. It was waiting. And that scared him more than any diagnosis ever could. Lena Harper sat in her apartment, staring at the lab report in her hands. Her name was printed at the top, next to the words, "Confirmed match." The report wasn't long, but the weight it carried felt heavier than anything she'd held in months. Her phone sat next to it, silent. No new calls, no texts. Damien Crest hadn't reached out again since the last missed call. She had expected him to try harder. Part of her wanted him to, but maybe this silence said more. Maybe he was finally starting to feel what she'd felt for 2 years, powerless. She stood up, took a deep breath, and reached for her coat. She didn't know what she was going to say, but she knew where she needed to be. Damien Crest was sitting upright when the knock came. He expected a nurse, or Jameson. Instead, Lena Harper stepped into the room. She didn't smile. She didn't sit down. She held up a folder. "I'm a match," she said. Damien looked at her for a long moment. "I figured. I had to find out for myself," she added. "No one told me. I asked to be tested." "Why?" he asked, his voice low. "You didn't owe me that." Lena paused. "Maybe I didn't, but I couldn't ignore it." There was silence between them, the kind that used to mean comfort. Now it just hurt. "You should know," she said quietly. "I got rejected from a job this week. Someone's been making calls." Damien's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "I'll fix it." "That's not the point," Lena said. "I just want you to know this isn't about guilt or control. I'm doing this because I want to, but that doesn't mean I'm coming back." Jameson stood in the hallway just around the corner from Damien Crest's room. He wasn't eavesdropping. He didn't need to. The conversation was predictable. Lena Harper had come back. Of course she had, but she was a complication, a loose thread, one that threatened the control Jameson had worked quietly to secure for months. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "We need to accelerate the board discussion," he said into the receiver. "He's not thinking clearly, and she's becoming a liability." The next morning, Lena Harper returned to the hospital. She was escorted to a separate room where the procedure would take place. It wasn't surgery, just a long, quiet process. Needles, tubes, machines humming softly in the background. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask how long it would take. She simply sat still as the machine began to collect what might be Damien Crest's only chance at slowing the disease. It wasn't love that brought her there. It was something quieter, something deeper, maybe something he would never understand. But she understood it. And for now, that was enough. Later that week, the board convened in private. Jameson presented his case subtly, strategically. He spoke of missed meetings, the health risks, the personal entanglement with a former assistant. But when he finished, the room didn't respond the way he had expected. One of the senior members leaned forward. "We've spoken with Damien," she said, "and we're aware of Lena Harper's role in his recovery. The doctors confirmed she's the only compatible match found so far." Another voice added, "Her presence isn't a liability. It's the only reason he's stable. We're not removing a CEO who's fighting to live." Jameson stayed quiet. For the first time in months, his plan was unraveling. Not with noise, but with truth. Lena Harper stepped into the executive elevator at Crest Dynamics for the first time since she'd left. She had come not for Damien Crest, not yet, but to sign release documents for the company to formally acknowledge her as a donor in his treatment plan. It was protocol. The floor numbers lit up slowly. She knew the ride by heart. She used to time her breath to the ding of each passing floor. Back then, she would use those seconds to prepare for whatever mood Damien might be in. Now, as the elevator climbed past the 40th floor, she wasn't preparing. She was remembering, not just what they had shared, but what they had lost the moment he chose silence over her. When the doors opened, she didn't expect to see him waiting. Damien Crest stood near the glass wall of the lobby, hands in his pockets, a quiet tension in his posture. When he saw Lena Harper step out of the elevator, he didn't move. She looked at him for a long moment before walking past. "I'm here to see legal," she said without stopping. He turned and walked beside her. "They're ready. I told them to expect you." She paused just outside the conference room door. "You don't have to manage me anymore." "I'm not," he said. "I just wanted to be here." "Why?" "Because I never was when it mattered." He didn't reach for her. He didn't ask her to stay. And maybe that was the first real sign he had changed. After the meeting ended, Lena Harper stood by the windows overlooking the city. Damien Crest approached slowly, not too close. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Not for your forgiveness, just so you know." She didn't stop him. He continued, "I kept us hidden because I thought that was the only way I could protect what I was building. I thought if I gave the world a target, they'd use you to get to me. But the truth is, I was the one afraid." Lena's voice was quiet. "Of what?" "Of needing someone more than they needed me." He looked down. "You were the only person I couldn't control, and the only one who made me wish I didn't have to." She nodded once. "You didn't need to protect me, you just needed to choose me." He didn't reply, he didn't argue, because she was right. That night, Lena Harper received a formal email from Crest Dynamics. The subject line read, "Invitation to attend annual gala." It was signed by the executive assistant to the CEO, someone new. Attached was a note from Damien Crest. Not poetic, not dramatic, just a sentence. "If you choose to come, I'll be proud to be seen with you." She stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the message and left it unanswered. The rooftop garden had changed. New lights, new banners. Same skyline. Damien Crest stood near the entrance, greeting guests with practiced charm, but his eyes flicked to the elevator every few seconds. Just past 9, the doors opened. Lena Harper stepped out, not in designer couture, not in something borrowed, just herself, simple, elegant, present. She walked up to him without hesitation. "I'm not here for you," she said quietly. "I'm here because I don't want to hide from who I am anymore." Damien nodded slowly. "That's enough." More than enough. He didn't take her hand, not yet. He didn't need to, because tonight for the first time she stood beside him, not in shadow, not in secret, but exactly where she chose to be. The press had been invited, but no official announcement was made, no declarations, no speeches. Just a room full of carefully dressed people and slow-moving servers balancing trays of champagne. But someone noticed. A photo surfaced before midnight. Damien Crest, standing next to Lena Harper. Not behind her, not ahead of her, beside her. His hand resting lightly at her back as they spoke with the head of one of the firm's largest investors. No titles, no labels, just presence. The caption said nothing. It didn't have to. They didn't say much in the car. Damien Crest sat beside Lena Harper in the back of the black town car, their hands resting close but not touching. The silence wasn't heavy, it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that only existed between two people who had already said the hardest things. At one red light, he turned slightly. "Thank you for coming." She nodded. "Thank you for not pretending tonight." He looked out the window again. "I'm not pretending anymore. About anything." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Damien Crest arrived at the office at 7:45 a.m. He poured his own coffee. He read through every contract without skipping. He asked Jameson for the quarterly reports, then requested a second review from legal. Jameson tried to hide his discomfort. "Something change?" Damien looked him in the eye. "Everything." That afternoon, Damien called an internal audit on board communications. quietly, efficiently, nothing aggressive, just enough to make Jameson uneasy. Lena Harper sat at a cafe across town, flipping through an old journal she hadn't opened in months. Inside were pages filled with entries from her time at Crest Dynamics. Notes, observations, moments. She stopped at one sentence scribbled in the margin of a page filled with scheduling notes. I think I love him. I wish I didn't. She tore the page out and set it aside. Then on a fresh page she wrote, I think I love him, and I'll be okay if he never says it back. But part of her hoped that one day he would. 2 weeks passed. Damien Crest's health began to stabilize. The treatments were working, not curing, but slowing. Lena Harper returned to work, not at Crest Dynamics, but at a small nonprofit Damien had funded quietly through a new foundation. No announcement, no title, just an opportunity. One morning, she arrived to find a note waiting for her at her desk. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was familiar. Some things don't need to be hidden to survive. Some things need to be seen to grow. Thank you for not giving up on me before I was ready. There was no return address. But she didn't need one. Damien Crest returned to the office one morning and didn't announce it. No press, no board memo, no speech. He simply walked in, reviewed his calendar, and began working. The staff adjusted quickly. It was as if the building itself had been holding its breath. By noon, operations ran smoothly. But something was different. Damien didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. He listened. When someone disagreed with him during a strategy meeting, he nodded and asked them to expand. The room went silent, not out of fear, out of surprise, and maybe something else. Respect. That evening, Lena Harper received a call from Mia. He's not the same, Mia said. He's not trying to control everything. It's weird. Lena smiled slightly. It's not weird. It's who he was supposed to be. Are you going back? Mia asked. Lena paused. No, not like before. I'm not going back to a role that made me disappear. But you're still in touch. Not every day, but when we talk, it's different now. Different how? Mia asked. Lena thought for a second. He's learning how to exist without pretending he doesn't feel anything. That silence again? Not heavy, just honest. And I'm learning not to wait for someone else's permission to move forward. At the next board meeting, Jameson attempted one final maneuver. He presented a document suggesting a long-term leadership contingency plan, subtly implying that Damien Crest might eventually become too unstable to lead. He framed it as proactive, strategic, professional. Damien listened quietly. When Jameson finished, Damien opened his folder and placed 2 items on the table. One was a medical report from his doctor confirming improvement. The second was an audit summary showing communication logs Jameson had accessed without authorization. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I appreciate your concern, Damien said, but I've already taken the liberty of submitting a motion to reevaluate the ethics code and your role under it. The room fell silent. Jameson didn't speak again that day. 3 days later, Lena Harper received a delivery. No flowers, no jewelry, just a small hand-stitched notebook and a note. This isn't a contract. It's just a beginning. If you ever want to fill the pages with something that's ours, not hidden, not one-sided, I'd like to do that with you. She closed the notebook, heart steady. Then she opened a drawer and placed it next to her journal, the one with the torn page. For now, she didn't write anything. But she didn't throw it away either. On a Sunday morning, they met in Central Park. No planning, no assistance, no agenda. Damien Crest brought coffee. Lena Harper brought nothing but time. They walked slowly, saying less than usual, but every word mattered. You still believe in second chances, he asked. Only when they're not copies of the first, she said. He nodded. This won't be. She believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of who he was now when he said it. A week after their walk, Damien Crest showed up at the nonprofit Lena Harper worked for. No driver, no security, just himself. He waited until she finished a meeting, then stepped into her office as if he'd done it 100 times before. She looked up, surprised but calm. Is everything okay? Yeah, he said, I just have a question. He pulled something from his pocket and set it on her desk. A single key. It's not to an office. It's not to anything you've ever needed me for. It's just a key to the place I want to share with someone. And I want that someone to be you. But only if you want it too. Lena looked at it for a long time. You're not asking me to move in. I'm asking you to move forward. With me. At your pace. She didn't give an answer right away. He didn't ask again. At his next hospital visit, Damien Crest sat through a final round of treatment. His doctor nodded with cautious optimism. The condition hadn't disappeared, but it had stabilized. The worst had passed. His body had stopped fighting itself. That night, he looked at the small scar on his arm, the one left by the transfusion needle. He didn't hide it, didn't explain it. It was proof, not of sickness, but of survival, and of the person who had stayed when he hadn't deserved it. Lena Harper was invited to speak at a panel on leadership and resilience. A young woman in the audience asked the final question. What's the one thing you wish someone had told you earlier in your career? Lena didn't pause. That it's okay to walk away from something, even if it looks perfect from the outside. You don't have to stay in rooms where your value isn't seen. The room fell silent for a beat. Then applause. She didn't name Damien Crest. She didn't need to. Months passed. Not everything was easy. They didn't erase what had happened. They didn't pretend it hadn't hurt. But Damien Crest showed up. Every day. With clarity, with patience, with consistency. One night, as they sat on the balcony of his apartment, no longer just his, he looked at her and said, "You were never the secret. You were the only real thing in my life. I just didn't know how to handle something I couldn't control. I love you, not because I need you, but because I finally understand how to choose you." Lena didn't cry. She just reached for his hand and didn't let go. There was no final scene, no dramatic kiss in the rain, no headline. Just two people who had failed each other, healed separately, and then learned how to try again without starting over. Lena Harper didn't become someone's assistant again. Damien Crest didn't return to who he was before. What they found wasn't a repeat of their past. It was a new version of a future they both helped build. Together, with no lies, no shadows, no secrets. And so what began as a hidden love story ended as something deeper. A story of growth, choice, and redemption. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. Even more unforgettable stories are coming your way.